Good day everyone, I am Gina Rose Chirivias Rado, and for today's video, our group will be talking about the topic political, economic, cultural, and social factors of city movements and settlements. The objectives for today's topic is at the end of the lesson, students will be able to analyze the political, economic, cultural, and social factors underlying the city movements of people. So my assigned topic is all about the political factors. One political factor that is almost universally common among the hunter-gatherers today is that they often do not own or have control of the land they live on. Until recently, the remoteness meant that they and resources on which they depended were somewhat protected from the outside influences. Thus, resources were locally controlled by informal norms through individual behavior. Now, however, national governments and private entrepreneurs, among others, have put native lands to productive use. This means that if the market for some product is strong, it will be exploited for cultivated regardless of the environmental impact. For example, the strong local demand for aguaja, which is a local plant in the Peruvian Amazon, has led to destructive harvesting. In theory, most hunter-gatherer communities have used rights to their territories, but old laws and treaties are continually violated. Legalizing communal resource use rights is a way of giving hunter-gatherers a long-term stake in conserving the resources on which they depend. There are political factors that cause people to move from their home country to another country. War, persecution, and the absence of political rights are the predominant political factors in migration. Another political factor is the state persecution. So state persecution involves the harassment, discrimination, and torture of people who disagree with their government, have minority religious beliefs, or ethnic backgrounds. Because conditions in their country are unsafe, these people are forced to migrate to safer countries. Asylum seeking is a direct result of the outflow of political migrants from an oppressive state to a more democratic country. For example, the Migration Policy Institute indicates that the United Kingdom received the highest asylum applications, 555,310, or 15% of the total global asylum application in 2002. These numbers, which remain roughly the same, reflect the rise in claims of persecution in countries such as Iraq, Zimbabwe, Somalia, Afghanistan, and China.
Next one is the political factors, which is the lack of political liberties. The lack of political liberties and rights and Epidemic Corruption Act has pushed factors for migrants seeking greater freedoms. Even though they are not persecuted in their places of birth, concerns that limit people's freedoms causes them to leave. So this is the reason why people leave their country. If the political environment is hostile, then the economic situation is likely to be poor. This triggers migration for political and economic reasons. Most migrants leave for more democratic countries where they can pursue better careers, education, and freedom. So the next one is war. According to the National Geographic's Earth Pulse, there are approximately 42 million people worldwide who have been forced to migrate due to war. War and armed conflict have diverse causes, but all these factors are influenced by political issues. War migrants not only migrate to the usual countries such as United States, United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia, they also migrate within their own geographical areas such as within their continent. Most war migrants become refugees or asylum seekers. Refugees International indicates that in 2009, there were 15.2 million refugees globally. So, another reason, the economic factors. Economic factors of migration is related to labor standards, unemployment, and overall health of a country's economy. Pull factors include higher wages, better employment opportunities, a higher standard of living, and education opportunities. Economic factors, the number one is the occupation is the main income factors of migration. People have to leave their home and migrate to other places for a new occupation and employment purposes. Mostly people from remote areas come to industrial and urban areas in search of work. Similarly, people try their lack of employment opportunities in foreign countries, next standards and higher wages. That's why our country here, which is the Philippines, has many OFWs or the overseas Filipino workers. It's because other country, they have higher salary compared here in the Philippines. So the next one will be reported by my other groupmates.
Economic factors why people move and settle in other countries. Number one is unemployment and better employment opportunities. So people have to leave their home and migrate to other places for a new occupation and employment purposes. Mostly people from remote areas come to industrial and urban areas in search for work. So similarly, people try their luck for employment opportunities in foreign countries. Example, my aunt. She went to other country for work because she does not have work here in the Philippines, or she doesn't have work here in the Philippines. So she looked for jobs in other country. That's why she migrated, because other countries are offering jobs opportunities to people like my aunt. Another reason is overall health of a country's economy. So living in a country where there is lack of many resources is risky. Imagine living in a country that does not have enough food. Even animals migrated because of that. So what are going to do is to look for places wherein the health of their economy is healthy in order for you or other people to survive. Another reason is higher standard of living. So access to medicine and food can bring a higher standard of living to impoverished areas. So it can be difficult to conceptualize what exactly is a high standard of living. It consists of, but a common way to think about it is as a quality of life that allows for basic health, societal and economical advancement and opportunity. So if a country have this, then there's no reason for a person or for a people to migrate to other country. Just like, for example, Africa. Africa does not have that what we call high standard of living, since they are a poor country wherein there is lack of food resources, access of medicine, and etc. Another reason is educational opportunities. So people migrated in search for good education. So why? It is very obvious. Lots of countries does have this what we call advanced learning, since students can access good equipments for their educational experience. Libraries, tools, equipments, and paraphernalias, knowledgeable teachers, and etc. Just like, for example, people in the Philippines want to migrate because they want to go to Harvard University. That's a good example. Why? Because it's observable. Koreans want to study here in the Philippines to enhance their English language. Okay, so that's also is a good example why people settled and moved to other countries. And that is what we call educational opportunities.
Cultural factors. Cultural push factors usually involve slavery, political instability, ethnic cleansing, famine, and war. People who choose to flee or are forced to flee as a result of these problems are often refugees. First is the slavery. Slavery is the primary example of forced migration, unlike voluntary migration has been practiced since prehistoric times. People are being exploited and pushed into slavery all around the world. While it may take different forms, we are committed to the ending slavery for everyone and everywhere. People can be particularly vulnerable to modern slavery when external circumstances push them into taking risky decisions in search of opportunities to provide for their families, or when people find they are simply pushed into jobs into exploitative conditions. Anyone could be pressed into the forced labor, but be people in vulnerable situations. Next is the political instability. Political instability caused by cultural diversity causes people of a certain cultural affiliation to move within the country or away from their country altogether. As a result of wars or ethnic strife, ethnic groups that were initially living apart can be forced within the same geographical boundaries. An influx of one cultural group can be displaced to another group. Governments can also force cultural groups to move from one place to another or within or outside the country to gain political advantage in having less cultural diversity. And next is the ethnic cleansing. So ethnic cleansing, the attempt to create ethnically homogeneous geographic areas through the deportation or forcible displacement of persons belonging to a particular ethnic groups. Ethnic cleansing sometimes involves the removal of all physical vestiges of the targeted group through the destruction of monuments, cemeteries, and houses of worship.
Another cultural factor is famine. Famines are sustained extreme shortages of food among discrete populations sufficient to cause high rates of mortality. Signs and symptoms of prolonged food deprivation include loss of fat and tissue, depression, apathy, and weakness, which progress to immobility and death of the individual, often from superimposed respiratory or other infections. So in here, one of the causes of migration is famine. It is because the people are more fond of looking of place where the food is stable there. So they tend to migrate in order to sustain their needs. Another one is war. Persecution because of one's ethnicity, religion, race, politics, or culture can push people to leave their country. A major factor is war, conflict, government persecution, or their being as a significant risk of them. So those fleeing armed conflict, human rights violation, or persecution are more likely to become humanitarian refugees. This will affect where they settle, as some countries have more liberal approaches to humanitarian migrants than others. In the first instance, these individuals are likely to move to the nearest safe country that accepts asylum seekers. For example, just like the war of Ukraine and Russia, the people in Ukraine seek asylum to the nearest countries wherein they can migrate and get their new life there. Let us proceed to the social factors. The first one is the marital status. So many migrants have non-labor motives to migrate, and they differ substantially from labor migrants for their migration behavior. So for family migrants, the decision to return is highly influenced by changes in their marital status. So due to marriage, women migrate to husband's home place. So similarly, young unmarried women also migrate for the sake of job as they are energetic. For example, is a Filipina married to an American citizen. So they will going to way where the country has most stable when in terms of having work. So mostly Filipinas would like to migrate to the US because there are more opportunities there, and they want to have a good family there in the United States of America. Another one is the political violence. So people do not like to stay where there are political violence and disturbance. So this is somewhat like related sa war. They intend to go to places with political peace and a safe environment. Thus, they migrate. Political push factors that influence migrations are persecution based on political identification, the civil war, just what I have said, and policy changes. So for example, agriculture policy is actually both a push and pull factor for migration. U.S. agribusiness depends on and exploits migrant labor for production, thus creating a pull to the United States. Other countries like India have recently created an agricultural policy that would negatively impact its farmers, pushing people to leave for their livelihoods. So, the other one is the better facilities. Or let us move on to the better facilities. So, people migrate to those places where they have better facilities of health services, educational services, transportation, and communication, and the life is easier. Of course, every one of us is aiming for a life that is, we think is easier for us. So, if people think that the country that they live in has make their life more difficult, then they can move to other, or they can migrate to other places where they think their life will be much easier than they were before. That ends our report. Thank you so much for watching this video. We hope that you learned something from it. God bless and goodbye.